Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to another Wolfram language design review, part of our language completeness and consistency series. And we have a variety of topics for today. And I'm trying to figure out why something is not working correctly here. Let me see if I can make it work. Okay. Okay. First, key auto stripping.
Right. So let me set the table a little bit here because this is spun off from the tabular meeting, but obviously we have people who weren't at that meeting, and there's um, also some additional issues. Um, right. So in the prototype build, we've made sort of we've made some changes to how key is handled by association and related functions. And sort of the goal is to make, association of key, key of association, lookup of association, and part of association and key sort of as similar as possible as they can be, although there's the part of me that's like, why do we need four different syntaxes for the same thing?
Yes.
Um, the other, this is what sort of came from the tabular project because we think this will sort of make a cleaner design with multi-keys, which are sort of essential uh, for tabular and sort of align um, association and tabular as much as possible. So the first change is to give the key the flat and one identity attributes. The flat, I think, is pretty assuming we agree with this whole direction, the flat is, I think, uncontroversial. The one identity I am personally, I mean, I understand why it makes some things cleaner, but given that it's not always true that key of X and X are semantically equivalent, I
Right.
find
To win it, one identity would not necessarily affect evaluation. It affects pattern matching, but not necessarily evaluation. Is that a true statement?
correct. That is correct. I'm just saying that,
Yeah, it's a little bit iffy.
in things that things like times, which have the one identity attribute, yes, X and times of X are not the same expression, but if you allow them to evaluate normally, they're always semantically equivalent.
Yes. No,
And
I don't think it's obvious that I think key of X shouldn't be the same as X, probably. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
right. So that's what's been done. We can discuss.
I'm
Um,
confused by the flat.
Yeah, so
Key
am
of
I.
key.
yes.
Yeah, that means that if I do happen to make an association with a key that is explicitly a key, then functions that require that I wrap the key in key won't let me access that key value pair from that association because key is flat.
Right. So the
That's
point
exactly
is
the
that
problem.
right. So part of the point is that uh association creation will strip the key. So that's the second bullet point. When association is created through evaluation, key point, um, any key of the form key of blank becomes just the blank. Um, and so you can't, through normal evaluation, create a valid association with those keys. So there's no need for the key of key construct. Now, in the binary compatibility issues, it's worth perhaps pointing out that, it's not completely true, and that might be worth at least briefly discussing, right? So, right, if you import a WXF or an MX, because those are sort of fully created expressions in them that don't go through the evaluator, then you can still have a key, which is a key in it. Um, and as it turns out, if you think very, very, very carefully about all of the proceeding, you can extract it, which is you need to do unevaluated of key, because that will prevent the flat attribute from firing. And then the lookup function will strip one level of key and find the thing that you're looking for. But, it took me several minutes of thought to come up with that construction once I noticed this
Okay,
issue.
can we zoom out for a minute? What are we trying to achieve here?
Right. So, right. So, Right. So there are the three design goals I mentioned about aligning these syntaxes and making tabular cleaner and aligning it with association. That's what we're trying to achieve. There are backward compatibility issues, and we need to sort of decide, are we okay with them or are they fatal? And so if we can look at the two examples of the two behaviors, or we can look at the new inconsistencies and just muddle our way through
Okay,
those.
so hold on. I have to say I'm a bit nervous now about the flat and one identity business.
Okay.
And I'm wondering why we need those things.
So I'm sorry. I would say that the fundamental thing here is to avoid users having to think, do I need A or key of A? Because once we put key inside multi-keys, we might end up with key of key if they are not careful, because they got a key from position, for example. And so it's key of A rather than A, and things like that.
Jose, can we try and make arguments about this without talking about multi-keys, which like so far are completely undefined, especially for this audience, and have not been design reviewed at all? Like if we
Okay, yes,
then maybe we cross that bridge, but I don't think everything can hinge on something that is still until
okay. So I would say yes. This example. Let's think of this example. So why should users have to be thinking about whether they need key of A or A?
Right. There can be some good reasons for that.
Because key is to me, key is at least two things right now. It's a quoting mechanism, and as such, it needs to be not to be flat, because otherwise you cannot quote multiple times. You cannot have iteration in the wine sense. And secondly, it's a shorthand form for lookup in some sense. And I think it's already pretty awkward that it's trying to be those two things. And this is where the tension comes from. I tend to use it mostly as a quoting mechanism. So to distinguish between part one, and if there is an integer key in an association, the key one.
But why should key of A and key of A be different? I mean, why? To me, this is like times.
Because
like times of X and times of X.
Right. No, because key of A is the key that is literally key of A.
Exactly.
Yes, but why do people need that?
Because they provide a way to collect meta information about positions.
Like you're creating a tree out of positions. Position returns key, even if it's just a string. And it's very useful that it's that way. It's very clear. It's very clean. And if you're grouping them and then you end up with an association which has key as a key, that thing is not the same as the naked A or as the naked one, even worse.
I think you just all got used to using key, right? It's like we could have gotten used to use times of X.
Right. And for example, dataset tries to avoid making you use key, but it can't be consistent because one, it's function query stuff, and two, this.
So Stephen, may I suggest that you open the prototype section and just so we can compare the two sets of behaviors. So we created a key. Well, we tried to create key of B, but it was stripped at creation time. And now, however many levels of key we have, we always extract the associated string. Now, of course, if we had an integer in there, it would be different. In the part case, it would be different whether it was one or key of one. Right. So I would say that the first and third subsequent outputs would be, right. And then, but if you did, key of one, you would, right. And if you did a sock of key of one, you'd get the same result. But if you did part one and part of key of one, you'd get something different.
Right, and that's because key is a disambiguator.
It's quoting, not disambiguation. It's different.
Oh boy. Okay, so the nice thing about this behavior in the prototype build is you don't have to think about, you have to use key only.
Right. So for example, if you want to make sure something is treated as a key, and you don't need to check if it's key of string or just string, you just wrap it in string. And if it happens to already be wrapped in key, then that key is auto flattened. That's that's the Jose and Rob argument. You know, the Jeremy and Carlo and Leonid argument is, well, but you know, what if I want to create a key, you know, use key as key of string as a literal key in my association? And maybe
And why
there's
would you
also
want to do that?
Because that gives you information about positions, which serves a role of meta information when you're thinking about positions as expressions.
Yeah, but
So
why use key specifically? Why don't you just use F or something?
Oh,
because that's what position returns right now.
Right.
So this is not a contrived example. This is how we discovered this behavior. So we had code that Leonid wrote in databases that was doing exactly that. It was constructing a tree-like expression made of associations that were constructed by grouping by on the result of positions.
And the reason I was doing that was that I needed to traverse expression and apply certain things during traversal only to specific positions. So I constructed a tree of positions essentially, where keys were in fact positions themselves.
Right.
And
Now,
so
sorry to cut you off, Leonid, but I tried to construct such an example on my own, since you had mentioned this in the previous meeting. And what occurred to me is that unless your expression is just a flat association, right, aren't you going to get a list of keys, and therefore you wouldn't have this issue when you called, right? Wouldn't each entry in position be a list of keys?
Yes, but then I'm doing Eli, but then I'm doing nested grouping to get a tree like a nested association expression out of that list of positions.
Okay, all right, now I understand.
And this was very important because I was doing double traversal of expression, traversing both original expression and that position tree. And that was a pretty essential part of our traversal mechanism for what we needed. It certainly can be rewritten, but it's not completely untypical to have this kind of construction. And all of them will be broken for us or for external code, whoever also uses this trick. And this is, I think, the instance of a more general problem, that key in that sense serves as a quoting mechanism for positions, just as, for example, verbatim serves as a quoting mechanism for patterns, or, you know, quoting for strings, which would be some specific slashes or strings, which when you want to quote things. And this is going to be completely destroyed.
Let me see.
Quasi-quoting, not quoting, but yeah.
Okay, so the issue is, you know, when would you ever, if key is automatically stripped, the only time you need to use key is in essentially quoting an integer to be a key rather than I'm totally confused.
Well, or in lookup, you have to quote lists because lookup has special behavior for lists.
Right. So in part, anything that could be a valid part spec on its own. So, you know, integer, list, span, all, etc. And in lookup, and also and possibly also, what is it? Join across, right? There's special syntax for, you know, list of keys and rules whose both sides are keys, etc. So,
yeah, and that's actually a good argument for Jose and I's side, I guess we'll call sides, is that when we do join across, say for tabular, we want people to think of columns and not keys. So it'd be nice to be able to do that without having to use key explicitly, which the code requires now.
But I still suspect that there are some bugs in join across, because it doesn't seem consistent what it's doing right now. So I wouldn't really take it as an argument against key.
You mean bugs in design?
Argument against join across.
So join across uses this difference too. for some reason that we don't understand. So we may believe it's even a bug.
Yeah.
But it distinguishes A from key of A. And it refuses to work with A, but it works with key of A.
You know, I'm trying to remember. There we go. This is deeply horrifying because this is essentially what in SMP, this is 1981, this is Mark. This was a total mess. I mean, it had all the same issues. I mean, it was a thing that was used to designate, to distinguish things like a literal position from one used as a name.
But
Yeah, I think, yes, I think, I mean, granted, there's nothing we can do about this now, right? But I think the literal sin was that, you know, we made, you know, key of string and string be the same thing. It should have been the case that in part, you always need key if you want it to be treated as a key.
I don't think that's yeah, okay, go ahead.
And everywhere else, you just give it, you know, the thing and it's a key.
Well, wait a minute.
No,
Do you think that's the only problem? I mean, so let's imagine.
well, lookup is a problem too. And in my code, I use lookup because I don't want to get a message. So that difference is important.
What does lookup do?
Lookup, it has special behavior for lists. So if you have a list, you have to quote that. If your key is a list, you have to quote that.
I see. Yeah.
Right.
You know, one thing that'll probably help all of this stuff is some syntax coloring indication. In, for example, lookup. If you start typing a list in lookup, to be able to get some kind of raft that offers you to essentially keyify it. Am I making sense?
But sometimes list is what you want because you
I
want to
understand. So that's why it's just not a suggest. It doesn't do it for you. It's just suggesting it.
Oh, I see.
Right? Because things like that can help smooth out what would otherwise be very confusing.
Right. And sort of, you know, I mean, the advantage, I think, I mean, I think, you know, Rob's argument is if you have lookup of X, you know, something comma X, where X is a, you know, module variable, and you really want it to be treated as a single key, you can just write key of X there. And then no matter what comes in, right? If what comes in happens to be wrapped in key, then it auto flattens. And, you know, if it's a list, it's treated as a key, etc. I'm not sure how Carlo and Leonid feel about that, but I think Rob sees that as an advantage.
Well, I think I can speak for both of us. We see this as a dangerous thing because it's this instance of auto-evaluation where if intent was to distinguish things for whatever reasons that could be, that would not be possible. And also, I think that the semantics of association is complex enough in terms of evaluation, and this will add another complexity on top that people might expect to get there into an ASOC exactly the same keys as they have. So if those keys have some key on top of that, or key of key, for whatever reason, I think people would expect generally to get that into a SOC and not be stripped.
Right. Okay. Look. This is truly complicated. And okay, do we understand, are there two distinct possibilities here? Or is it that there's much more than that?
No, I think there is don't do anything, and then there's like the other thing is a spectrum. Like I guess we could decide not to do everything that was proposed, but probably it would leave it in more broken state. So
right. Yeah, I think there are, there might be a couple of minor variations on the new approach, but there's basically the current approach and the new approach. And and then how that may or may not impact multi-keys is certainly not something I understand. I'm not sure how much
Okay,
Rob.
I
Jose
can't
understand.
figure this out right now. I don't think we have. I mean, I think we've now primed this issue. How do we move forward on it? I mean,
Right.
the conservative thing to do is nothing.
Right.
And the problem with that is that there's some kind of frustration in, do I need key or do I not need key? I think it's worth looping in our user assistance possibilities.
yeah, I think, I mean, I personally, maybe once I understand multi-key, could be bought into the new version, but I can't claim I understand multi-key right now.
So my suggestion is, if there are places where you likely need key, is there a way of auto-suggesting that will make it a lot less painful than, oh, I didn't put key in, do I need key, do I not need key, I'm confused, right? Seems to me we need to loop that in and see whether both, the conservative approach that says you don't, you put in key more explicitly, you don't auto-strip it, but the putting in of key is hinted to you or even almost done for you by an auto-suggest. That seems, worthwhile.
Right. Which I'll say is fine for interactive, but it may not solve sort of programmatic issues.
Well, if you're writing code and you have the code assistant on, then it'll do it
right.
there.
But if you don't know what X is, right, because until some user runs it, you don't know what it will be. Right. That's sort of. But
I understand.
Yes.
I mean, look, I think that the next iteration of this, we should talk about how we, code assist some of this stuff.
Okay. And do you want that to be a meeting with you, or do you want us to have a separate meeting?
Why don't you try a meeting without me that just asks the question, how good can the code assistance be?
Okay.
And then, because if it's filling in key, pseudo automatically and just hinting you, oh, you might need a key there, I think it could be fairly convenient. I mean, I think the thing that is not very satisfactory is this mystery hunt where, do I need a key? Do I not need a key? I've got to run the code to find out.
Yeah.
So that's a good argument for having all the things consistent, because basically using key will almost never give you the wrong thing with the new changes.
Right. Well, so let's see how good we can make the code assistance and see whether we then feel better about it.
Mm-hmm.
I have one more question. We have had this for some time in the prototype, and the only thing we broke, as far as we know, is databases for Carlo and Leonid. So, for example, something like data set, which is also a big consumer of associations and keys, nothing broke there. So, but of course, prototype is not master. So, is there a possibility of testing this in master like for a week and seeing if something breaks? And is there an easy way of backing this out?
I mean, I'm not an enthusiast. People are going to, in that time, I guarantee people are going to build production code there.
I see.
And,
okay.
I think it would be better.
Well, maybe we send an email to L kernel and say,
why don't
if you
we
have code that's very association based, please try the prototype build and see how it feels, because we've made these changes.
I think that's the right thing to do.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay.
By the way, my guess in terms of data set is that the dataset test suite, which tests more the internals of data set, will not break, but maybe somebody has a data science kind of workflow based on top of it.
That's what I'd be worried about is external to the kernel stuff.
Okay. Can we go on?
Yep.
Okay.
Right. So we remember we had some discussion of this a few weeks ago, but due to a power outage in Montana, Rob was unable to join us. And so there were sort of
gosh, that's complicated.
Yeah.
So you had introduced string arguments to interpolating function ages ago in a kind of rogue way.
Yes. Yes,
Right.
I plead guilty.
Right. So
right.
Go ahead.
Right. And so, where we left the discussion last time is sort of, a lot of these things sort of, sort these into things that make sense in information and things that don't. And then we can sort of focus the discussion on the things that, that we would like, but don't necessarily make sense in information. So, we have 4 groups here of, informational things that likely or definitely make sense in information, informational things that don't make sense in information because they're internal. Like one of these things is a pointer because, that was necessary for some library to talk to some other library. Right. We're not going to expose that in information.
Yeah, right.
But,
I mean, get polynomial. I don't understand. Why isn't it just polynomial? Except it needs a point.
Could be local
Right.
polynomial.
Local polynomial. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And so the question is, do we want to sort of document these using a data set like syntax? Right? Because this obviously isn't something that you can get from information, right? You need to add these 2 additional data points of the points in your variables.
Well, I thought information had a way to give it additional arguments.
You can ask for subproperties, but you can't, if Nick is here, but I don't think it has.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, there's no parameterized properties in information generally.
Well, then give a function. Give a function that get information can have a function, a polynomial function or something. That's just some pure function that extracts this, maybe. Is this important, Rob?
No. It's something that Roger had wanted at some point for it. I honestly don't remember if it's actually used any place or not.
Yeah, from what I've heard from my discussions with Rob and Oliver, who's also here, if we need him, vector evaluate sounds like the only one that they actually think is useful.
What does it do?
Right, so it avoids the normal listable behavior.
Okay, but you've got a new solution for that, so we don't have to worry about this.
What's the new solution?
All these vector variables, which I'm going to hear about at some point.
No, that's not a solution to anything.
Well, in the example you're showing, the example that's interesting for vector evaluate is when you have several points, not just a single point.
Right.
What's the point of several points?
Like,
well, that's
list of lists.
That's used in finite element stuff all the time.
Yeah, okay, but what's different about vector evaluate of a list of lists and just ordinary list of lists?
Well, that one threads all the way to look at the two last inputs in that subsection there, right? Vector evaluates treats a list as a point and a list of lists as a list of points.
So this is delistability, basically.
Exactly.
Okay, which is an issue we have in a bunch of other places.
Yeah.
And I thought we were coming up with a general solution to delistability that involves vector variables.
That I don't.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's going to work for this case.
Why?
Right, because in that case you have a combination of scalar things and vector things, right? That is solving the right. Vector variables solve the problem of we have X, which is a vector variable, and when we add it to the list 1, 2, it stays as X
Okay,
plus
so
list 1, 1, 2 rather than
the basic
threading.
point
Here
is
we
you
have
want
an
to be able to
explicit list
say,
of points.
right, you want to be able to say, take this in one gulp.
Right.
Yeah.
Delistify it.
Right. And part of the problem with interpolating function is it's not listable. It has this pseudo listability.
In what sense?
In the sense that it's not truly listable, but if you give one argument as a list and the other as a scale, say it's a 2D one, you give one as a list, one as a scalar, it'll do threading there, but it's not truly listable threading.
Okay,
But
so the basic point is a two-dimensional interpolating function. I don't understand why this is a problem. Okay, let me play through this for a second. Okay, we've got a two-dimensional interpolating function. Okay, and you feed it a list pair like this. What could it possibly mean other than gulp the whole thing? Because if it threaded, then it would be a one-argument interpolating function, which wouldn't be right.
Yeah, but I think Itai is I can't tell what his IF is. Is it two-dimensional or one-dimensional?
Yeah, it's a 2 to 1. If you look at the top of the
okay.
section, you'll see that it's
Okay,
the domain.
well, so in that case, I don't understand why IF
Yep.
of list 2.5, 3.5.
So do IF vector evaluate, say, random real of 1, comma, make an actual list of points instead of just a single point in 2D.
Okay.
And that's the case that, and we can be much more efficient evaluating that.
Sorry,
Yeah,
you're
so
saying
you want 10, comma 2 exactly.
okay. So it's IF of this. Is that correct?
That won't work.
Right. It's IF of vector evaluate at that.
Okay, but listen.
Right.
We did the wrong thing here. Okay.
Yes, I know.
This is a hand. Look, hold on a second. This is hand threading, right?
Right.
Why doesn't the hand threader say, I have the type pair to single element. Therefore, when I interpret this, I know that this must be a list of individual points. You see what I'm saying?
Right. I mean,
I don't understand why you can't do that.
as long as the data is entirely numeric, I think we can probably do that. I mean, Rob would know.
Well, how could it not be numeric? Because if it's an interpolating function, it's not numeric. It's going to croak anyway.
It won't croak. It'll just stay unevaluated.
Okay, fine. But then we got vector variable issues and things like this.
Yeah,
right?
I can experiment with that. I think it's potentially dangerous, but it might be a way around.
I predict it's going to work. Okay, the other thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I guess one question is, can the input be ever anything other than a oh no, because we use apply. So the input domain is always Rn. It's never Rn by n or something crazy like that. So we could distinguish between flat lists and matrices.
Yeah.
Rob, am I making sense to you? And the answer is yes.
Yeah, I mean, if I understand what Stephen's saying, I think I do, is that if the last dimensions, if it's given as one argument, the last dimensions matches the dimensionality of the interpolating function, we treat them as points.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that can be done.
Good. That seems like a very useful thing.
We'll see what kind of Ying will be very good at finding the chaos that creates, if it does.
Let's deal with that. Okay. The second thing we had to talk about here was regions for interpolating function.
Right. So, and I talk about that in the points above that first long list, right? So, I mean, one question is, do we want grid and values on grid, which can be quite large? So do we want them? And then there's the question of sort of domain versus a region. And can we have a region domain that's sort of more precise?
I don't understand any of this.
Maybe one comment concerning the region. So region is a symbolic, it's like a spatial construct, but interpolating function can also have a temporal component. So if you call it region, it kind of doesn't allow that possibility.
I don't understand what you're saying. So you're saying an interpolating function could be of a time series.
Yeah. Not time series, but it could be have a temporal component like a PDE that's time dependent. So here you have a spatial and a temporal component.
Yeah, suppose you've simulated the motions of a drum head on a circle. Okay, so
no, I've seen these. They're beautiful. They're interpolating.
Yeah, they're beautiful. Well, that's got a 1D set of time with the 2D region.
Yeah, I understand. It's in space time. It's a region in space time as opposed to a region in space.
Right, precisely.
I think for the last 100 years, the concept of a region in space time has not been totally alien.
Right. But that's kind of not what our region means.
How do you know? Our region is just some geometric thing in, some number of dimensions.
True. That goes up to 3D, basically.
So our region can go to any number of dimensions.
Right. We have regions in any number of dimensions.
I think that's a non-issue. I don't understand why that's an issue. Interpolating function doesn't know that, when it's x, y, and time, all it knows is I'm interpolating. It doesn't know if that's a time or a space or anything. It could be at x, y, z in space. It's just going to interpolate.
Right. I agree with Stephen on this point. I don't know why, you as the person who have giving it semantic meaning of spatial variables versus temporal variables, but I don't think that interpolating function itself has any such notion.
No, the function itself doesn't.
Right. Okay. So then what is the issue here? So there's the question whether information with a region should have a way of given a region symbolic region specification of where the interpolating function has support. Is that the question?
Correct. Well, I guess there are sort of multiple questions of that which for which that is the first. If we have that, does the current domain thing, which currently gives sort of the bounding box, is that still a useful thing if we can be more precise? And I don't understand exactly to what extent the domain can be not square, but I've certainly know that I've gotten things out of ND solve, and then even though I'm giving it points that are
let all of us speak to that, please.
Well, the drum example is not square; it's a cylinder.
Okay, but so hold on. If you asked it to solve, ND eigensolve over a circle through time, then the interpolating function does what outside the circle?
It gives indeterminate. We don't have a solution outside of the circle.
Does it give indeterminate, or does it give missing?
No, it gives indeterminate. We don't know what the solution is. It's not missing. We don't know. It's not.
Right. Okay. Fine.
It's not.
So,
yeah.
Okay. So it is super useful then to have a region that tells you this interpolating function has support and is determinate.
Whether it's structured or unstructured, basically.
Yeah. I think my opinion is the domain should go, and we should replace it with a region.
Yeah, it sounds right to me. I mean, we could, as a courtesy, we could make
Right. I would just suggest maybe something a more specific name, like maybe domain region, just because region by itself doesn't necessarily, to me, say input.
Well, where I see. Well, I think it does, but I mean that's what we're using it in all the regions. But where else do we have a region property of things?
Spatial point data.
Say it again.
Spatial point data.
Okay, and there it's clearly the, well, there it's not so much the domain, right? That's like an actual collection of points.
Yes,
right?
but you always specify a region with them.
Let's
see, you're
try
saying-
calling it region and see what happens, because it's going to give a
Okay.
region object. Okay, I need to
Okay.
go very soon. So let's just have a quick look through here. What is this?
I don't think we can get through this in 9 minutes, maybe the last one, but this is, I mean, if we want to advance control equal, we need to make decisions about
Equal
like
bracket, you mean?
thank you, equal bracket. There's a reason I called it the fourth equal, but there are both language issues and some interaction issues. But before we can implement anything, we need to decide on the language issues. So, you know,
All right, and this is also somewhat dependent on possible extension of control equals to handle LLM processed material, I think. It's a mess. This is complicated, I agree. So let's not try to handle it.
That is the first that I've heard of that statement, though.
Me too.
Well, I mean, really? I mean, it's like you use something to get a code fragment. I don't know whether it's control equals or something else. Right? The idea is you want to ask for a little piece of code. All right, I'd love to get through this because, okay.
Right. So just to remind everyone, right, we're thinking about how to clarify star bracket. And so, you know, Billy
Star caret.
Star caret, thank you. I can't speak today apparently. And so you know, through a couple of iterations, you know, Billy and John and I sort of came up with what's there. And actually, when I showed that to Jose, his initial response is like, what's this decimal times operator? So maybe we didn't do a very good job, but I figured it was still worth discussing.
Yeah. Well, what about putting the 10 right underneath the caret?
I don't think that
crazy?
works. It just looks like 10 hat.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it would be more, I think vertically centering the 10 with the star, so it looks more like just a small independent thing, is probably a better.
But what about ligaturing it to be?
What does ligaturing it mean?
Turning it into a single ligature type thing. And I mean, in other words, right now we got a big blobulous. Oops, I don't know what I did there. Okay, so we got the big blobulous. Help! I just want command 9. Okay. I've got a big blobulous star wedge. Okay.
Yep.
Even if that thing became smaller and got a really tiny 10, that might indicate.
I don't think it can be smaller and have a legible 10 in it. I mean, note that what we made is already larger, actually.
You mean the star wedge is larger?
Yeah.
Well, the star 10
the star 10 wedge is larger than the star wedge. And I don't think the star wedge can be made smaller and have a 10 inside of it. The star wedge could be made smaller if it's just star wedge, sure. But also putting a 10 in there, I just don't think it can be done.
All right. So do you guys think I'm wasting? I mean, is there something here? In other words, star wedge just looks kind of incomprehensible and whatever. It'd be nice if it indicated somehow what it was.
Yeah, well, if we're willing to go wider, I think, you know, making the 10 vertically aligned with the star and moving the wedge that it's clearly to the right, so it looks like times 10 to the 5th would provide some clarification. You know, whether that meets our aesthetics is, you know, something I'm not qualified to answer.
And I felt it was important to maintain something starish and something wedgish because I think if you type it in and it turns into something that looks completely different, that's just more confusing.
Yeah.
Okay, listen, I need to wrap here, so we are going to have to cover this a different time.
Okay.
All right. See you guys soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you.